All right, let's move on to the natural science passage. Of course, with all the passages, again, reading this would be very important. Talks about Needles and Nerves by Catherine Dole by 1999 by the Walt Disney Company. I don't know why Walt Disney Company would actually publish this, but anyways, this is an article, Needles and Nerves, right? So Needles and Nerves kind of give you the idea, right? It's going to be about, either it's going to be about not knowing what we're talking about. It's either going to be about injections and how the injections could affect the nerves or whatnot, or it could be about the Oriental medicine, the acupunctures, right? You know what an acupuncture is. You have a big needle and then you'll put it into a certain acupressures of the body to relieve that pressure, which is called the qi or ki or whichever you might call it. It could be that, or it could be, like I said in the previous manner, or it could be the injection going totally wrong. But it starts with acupuncture, so obviously it's going to be acupuncture. It's going to be about acupuncture. So acupuncture and other forms of traditional Chinese medicine have been around for more than 4,000 years. Now, I want to make a little bit of a distinction or a little bit of clarification. It's not really Chinese medicine. I'm not saying that, just because I'm Korean or just because I'm not Chinese. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying that it is an Oriental medicine because it's not just, it hasn't just come from China, but it was developed in Korea, it was developed in Japan as well. I mean, the art of a lot of medicine that we know today as Chinese medicine has come from all over the regions of East Asia. And so therefore, I wouldn't necessarily say Chinese medicine, but I would say Oriental medicine, right? So Oriental medicine have been around for more than 4,000 years. So we're talking about the length and the duration of this medicine being, developed all throughout these years. Now, the last sentence of the first paragraph states that if the flow of the force is disturbed, the theory goes, the resulting deficiency, excess, or stagnation of qi causes bodily malfunctions and thus illness. Now, I frequent the Oriental clinics, and I do get this treatment, which is called the acupuncture, and it does really help. Maybe it could be placebo effect, but it does really help in a sense that, for example, let's say if you sprain your ankle, right? The best thing to do is not to put. The best thing to do, of course, is the very emergent thing to do, or in an emergency, you should put on either a ice pack or either a hot pack or whichever cases it might be. You do that, right? I mean, that's the only thing you can do in the Western sense of medicine. But in the Eastern medicine or the Oriental medicine, what you do is you put on needles on your ankle or around your ankle or seemingly non-related parts of the ankle, right? So what they do is they do that, and then it immediately feels better. I've experienced this several times. As I engage in a lot of sports. I sprained my left ankle so many times that it is now, it's like my left ankle has become so brittle and weak, right? The first time I did it, the first time was when I was back in like high school, and so I wasn't really able to do anything but to put on an ice pack or whatever, right? It wasn't broken, so I wouldn't put a cast over it or anything. So that was it, right? Or maybe taping it, or maybe just like putting a gauze or putting a pressure on that. But when I came back to Korea and then I started, and my left ankle started to, really, become weak, I went to the acupuncturist and I had the acupuncture done. And it does heal so much faster and does give you so much of a, I can't explain it that well, but maybe there's this force called qi that's flowing all throughout my body, and maybe there was a blockage of qi to that part of my body, and so what I did was, what the acupuncture does is that release the qi to flow to that part of the body. I don't know what that is, but that's what they're saying, right? It says, the theory goes, the resulting deficiency, the excess or the stagnation of qi causes bodily malfunction and thus the illness, right? And then the second paragraph says, acupuncture in which needles are inserted into specific points along the meridians and manipulated is said to restore the proper flow of qi and thereby return the body to health, right? So we call this a meridian. Meridians are the the centers of your body, right? It's the central line that passes through your it's the central line that passes through your major so to speak, the major, like the force points. Okay, starts from the top of the head to the front of your it's front of your forehead and your nose and the part between your nose and mouth. And then it goes straight towards, right, and to your sternum, to your stomach, and so on and on. It's a line that draws. One interesting thing is that this meridian idea is not just Oriental, but it's also Western as well. If you look at one of the buildings, I don't quite remember what that building was or what that building was supposed to be, but there is a building complex in Paris, right, which depicts these meridians. This like a live person. Then they have built a certain structure, right? Certain structures to that meridian line, and we still have that meridian line within our Earth geology as well. We have something called the meridian line, and of course this goes into the sort of like the conspiracy theory. But the 33rd meridian line is the most important, and so it sort of passes through the important parts of the world as well. So that's the meridian part of it. It's not just Oriental. I'm just saying it's not just Oriental. It's also Western as well. All right. So that's the part of it. It says Qi, right? It restores the proper health, proper bodily function. The third paragraph, another integral concept is the tension between the two ever-present complementary forces in nature, the yin and yang, right? You know what they are, the yin and yang. It's the cold and hot. It's the woman and men, right? It's the yin and yang. So you would have the yin and yang, right? That's the yin and yang sign, right? If you think about it, it's true because there's always this bipolar ideas. For example, if there's coldness, there's hotness. If there is sadness, there's happiness. If there is tall, there's short. If there's fat, there's slim. It's this bipolar ideas. If there's danger, if there's safe, right? I mean, these bipolar ideas have always been present, like men and women, right? And so, therefore, I guess the forces of nature, like yin and yang, might be true. Because, I mean, that's because, for example, I think it all sprang from having two genders, two sex, right? Women and men. And that sort of became a force in nature. And so therefore, I mean, if you look at the nature all throughout, yes, there are asexual reproductions and those things, or those, small animals that do that. But most of the world that we see today, most of the world that human eyes can see, it's mostly two genders, and reproduction happens between the two genders. And I guess this had to be a very important part in human beings, and so that became like a force, a driving force of human nature, and because they were able to observe this everywhere, they would just put it into, or maybe the ancient Chinese and maybe ancient Easterners thought that it was like, boom, it was the life force, yin and yang, right? Okay. And then, of course, the third paragraph says, doctors and licensed practitioners administer between 9 to 12 million acupuncture treatments each year in the United States, commonly for pain control. You see, even the natural sciences will talk about, right now we're talking about the actual Oriental medicine, but we're talking about Oriental medicine within the United States. 9 to 12 million acupuncturists, right? Acupuncture treatments have been done each year in U.S., right? According to the neuroscientist Bruce Pomerantz of the University of Toronto, numerous studies over the past 20 years have shown that inserting needles into acupoints stimulates nerves in the underlying muscles. It actually does. It has been proven by the Western medicine. Now, Western medicines, or people who practice Western medicine, sort of like look down on the Oriental medicine, and they tell them that it's a pseudo medicine. It's not really science. It's pseudoscience. It's a nonsense. But they're now trying to figure out whether it actually works. It definitely does stimulate the nerves. Now, stimulating the nerves, I guess, could have some kind of effect, right? After all, the nerves are the electrical wiring of our body, and if the electrical wiring gets gets loose, or if it's broken, then you have to fix it, right? Of course, nerves are impossible to fix, but I guess you can stimulate the nerves to bring about better results in overall bodily function, right? And then it says the endorphin story is really nailed down, says Pomerantz. So endorphin story, I guess. right? So if you stimulate the nerve, then endorphin is supposedly, the hormone endorphin is secreted, and so therefore you feel better, right? But it says its story really nailed, the endorphin story is really nailed down, meaning it doesn't really fly. The endorphin part of it, maybe that's what the opposition or the opponent of the theory might say, but it's nailed down, because if you read further, because that's what he said, we'll just read it. The acupoints have been mapped over thousands of years like the spots where the nerves are concentrated, and then it says, but the endorphin theory doesn't explain many of the other claims of the acupuncture. It continues, there have been a number of clinical trials showing the acupuncture is extremely useful for the nausea caused by the chemotherapy in an earlier pregnancy, and that's not the endorphin system, right? Okay, and then the next paragraph says, nor does the endorphin theory explain what physicist Zhang He Cho found when exploring acupoints that are traditionally used to treat vision problems, right? So it doesn't really show any of the endorphins effects on the vision treatments, right? And then to test that premise, Cho strapped student volunteers into the fMRI, which is the functional magnetic resonance imaging machine, the results from which can be viewed as colorful brain activation maps, right? So what fMRI does is that fMRI pictures your brain, and it will have different colors on the different parts of your brain, and I guess that's what they saw. It's like Christmas tree, lighting up like Christmas tree, right? And then, like many preliminary scientific reports, Cho's study raises more questions than it answers. So Cho did that, but then it raises more questions than answers, just like any other preliminary examinations or preliminary investigations, right? Okay, good. So we know what it's talking about. We know the flow of the idea. It talks about the acupuncture first of all, and the Oriental medicine overall. And then it says that it does actually help people, right? And then it goes into say in US there are 9 to 12 million acupuncture treatments done every year, and then it goes and says, opponents probably think that it's endorphin that helps people to feel better, but the studies show that it's not really endorphin. And then what's his name, Zhang He Cho, he actually did try to prove that it was wrong by using fMRI, but then his studies, although promising, does raise more questions than it answers, right? So therefore, definitely that's the flow of the idea, and you should put that into your head before we go into the questions. All right, let's go into the questions. Question 31, the passage mentions that the onset of illness would be caused by any of the following except for this one. Now, of course, this is in relations to the passage, so it will talk about the ki, right, the life force. Now, which one of these will cause disease and which one of these will not be the cause of disease? So we're looking for the not cause of the disease, right? Not cause of the disease. Now, shortage of the ki, the excess of ki, a change in the temperature of ki, and a disruption of the flow of ki. Now, you know that the disruption of the flow is definitely one of the causes of, right? Mentions onset of the illness. This is definitely one of it. And I guess the shortage of ki is also one of it, right? But we don't know if the excess of the ki or the change in the temperature of ki would have any effect on that. So let's go back. If you go back, we are talking about ki, right? And I guess this part, it talks about the acupuncture and talks about the ki. Yes, it does talk about the illness part of it. So I think we've already read that part, right? I think so. The theory goes, the resulting deficiency, the shortage of it, the excess of it, or the stagnation of ki. Stagnation is the disruption in the flow of the ki, causes bodily malfunctions and the illnesses. So therefore, the answer will have to be the change in the temperature of ki. That's not something mentioned, right? So therefore, definitely, right? We've read that part. I've been, so engulfed by this idea of, explaining what this Chinese or Oriental medicine does, and I kind of forgot about it. But you shouldn't, right? So we already read that, so that's our answer. All right, moving on. According to the fifth paragraph, lines 35-45, studies have shown that the insertion of acupuncture needles into acupoints causes nerve stimulation that results in what, right? So we know that it does actually stimulate the nerve. We found that in the fifth paragraph. We actually did. If you remember, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we did. Neuroscientists, 20 years have shown that inserting needles into the stimulating nerves in the underlying muscles, we read that. But what does that do? That stimulation, researchers believe, sends impulses up the spinal cord to a relatively primitive part of the brain known as the limbic system, as well as to the midbrain and the pituitary gland. So we found that right there, right? We have the idea. So what it does is that it will stimulate the spinal cord, up the spinal cord, into the relatively primitive part of the brain, which is called the limbic system, as well as the midbrain and the pituitary gland. So therefore, what would be your answer then? Signals being sent to the brain and pituitary gland, which leads to the release of chemicals. Signals being sent to the spinal cord, which immediately blocks the release of chemicals. Chemicals being released that amplify signals to the spinal cord, or chemicals being released that numb the spinal cord and prevent signals being sent to the brain and the pituitary gland. Which one of these, right? Definitely the answer will have to be this, right? Brain and pituitary gland, which leads to the release of chemicals, right? Definitely. Of course, they haven't mentioned the limbic system, but they said it was brain, and of course the pituitary gland, right? So therefore, that should be the answer. It's the stimulation of the nerve that stimulates the bodily stimulates the part of the brain that will release or trigger the release of the chemicals into your body, right? So therefore, that's the answer. 33. The studies of acupuncture described in the 5th paragraph, the lines 35 to 45, can best explain the success of acupuncture in treating which of the following conditions. So if you vaguely remember, we talked about nausea, definitely, right? And then we talked about the blurred vision as well in the one of the paragraphs. Now headaches, maybe not. Impaired immune system. Now which do you think in the 5th paragraph explains the acupuncture treatment? Now 5th paragraph, we'll go back. We remember those things, but we don't know if it was on the 5th paragraph. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So 5th paragraph, it says, somehow this signaling leads to the release of endorphins and monoamines, chemicals that block pain signals in the spinal cord and the brain. So pain signals, right? So pain signals. So what can we say about this pain signal? What can we say about this pain signal? So is it, well, which one of these would be pains, right? So is it blurred vision pain? Not really. It's not a pain. Nausea is not, you can't really call it a pain. Impaired immune system, you can't call it a pain. So the only pain we see is the headaches, right? Pain. The pain would be headaches. Aches are pains, and so that's the only answer you see, right? You know how to, right? You see how to drive your answer from that, right? Okay, 34. According to the passage, the study by Cho showed that volunteers experienced an increase in visual cortex activity when they were done what? Now you know that Mr. Cho or the Dr. Cho had placed volunteers under an fMRI and observed them, right? And we don't know the details, and so we need to find the details, right? So where did the volunteers experience an increase in the visual cortex activity? So visual cortex activity, we'll find that. So first, Cho stimulates the eye of the volunteers by flashing a light in front of them. The resulting images, as expected, show a concentration of color, an increase in activity in the visual cortex, the portion of the brain that is known to be involved in eye function. Now then Cho had an acupuncturist stimulate one of the vision-related acupoints. In one person after another, the very same region of the brain lit up on the fMRI image, and the magnitude of the brain activity seen on acupuncture stimulation was nearly as strong as that elicited by the flash of light. So same thing, right? So meaning what then? So increase in visual cortex activity when viewed brain activation maps? No. Were exposed to high concentration of color? No. Received acupoint stimulation to their big toes? We don't know that. Underwent acupoint stimulation of the outside of the foot? Not known that. So we need to, I guess, again, look into that, right? So which one of these? So let's see. So which one of these were they acupointed, or at least they underwent the acupoints, all right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 fMRI right there, right? So it says there you go. The image or the magnitude of brain activity was the same, right? To eliminate the possibility of placebo effect, Cho also stimulated a non-acupoint in the big toe. So big toe is non-acupoint, right? There was no response in the visual cortex. So non-acupoint. So I'm sorry. So big toe is non-acupoint, right? So I guess if that's true, none of these are true, then this will have to be true, right? Underwent an acupoint stimulation of the outside of the foot, and that should be your answer, right? Simple as that. 35. Information in the last paragraph indicates that the acupuncture research has given results that what? So last paragraph, if you remember right, it raised more questions than it answered. So meaning there are more questions raised. So the result would be thoroughly explain mechanisms by which the acupuncture functions, explain some aspects of how acupuncture functions while leaving other aspects open to further study. Explain some aspects of how acupuncture functions while questioning the method used in previous studies. Do not explain any of the mechanisms by which acupuncture functions. So only viable answer should be B, right? It means it opened questions, yes it did, but it also answered some of the questions. So let's see if that's the answer, obviously, right? We have read that, and it should give you the answer right away because you know that that's what they're talking about. It did answer questions, but it raised more questions than it answered, meaning that the aspects are somehow explained, some of the aspects been explained already, but then it raised other aspects to an open further study, right? Okay. 36. The passage indicates that the balance between yin and yang in a person depends on that person's emotional state, blood flow, pulse, or level of ki. And of course, level of ki is the only answer, right? Because we're talking about ki, and yin and yang is that famous natural force between the woman and man, the positive and the negative, right? So that's what we're talking about. Emotional state, no. Blood flow, no. Pulse, no, because all these are affected by ki anyways, right? Okay. 37. According to the passage, a person with a yang condition might exhibit all of the following except for this one. Now, this is where you can actually, this will actually help because having a background information will definitely help. Yin is the negative. It's so-called the woman. Okay? Yang is the positive. It's so-called the men. Okay? And of course, the yin is the negative force of it. I'm sorry to impose this on the woman, but it's the negative force which is cold, which is like, which is kind of dark. All that negative association is with the woman. I'm sorry, but it is. It's associated with the moon. It's associated with the sun, and so on and on and on. All right. So if you think about it, then. If a person is conditioned or yang condition, right? If positive conditions, of course, positive condition is not always good. If it's more positive, then it's really bad, right? Fever, it's one of them. Yes, fever is the heat, right? Heat, sun, right? Fast pulse, one of it. Yes, fast pulse is like beating fast, heart beating fast. That's because of the positive effect of the beating, right? Agitation or pale face, which one, right? It's the pale face that has to be the yin sort of, right? It's the negative sort of, because agitation, fast pulse, and fever are all coming from that positive reaction or too much positiveness, right? If you're too enthusiastic, you become agitated, you become your pulse becomes beating fast and you have the fever. But pale face only comes when your blood flow is below normal, right? When you become cold, and so therefore pale face your answer, right? We didn't even have to look back. It's one of those background informations that might help you. If you've studied yin and yang, it does definitely help you do that. But if you don't know your yang condition, then of course you have to look through the actual passage, right? So we'll go back to that passage which will deal with the yin and yang. So I think it's right there, yin and yang. So when their balance is disturbed, the theory goes, people get sick. Yin conditions, it's yin and yang, usually yin and yang, but anyways, yin conditions reflect the lack of ki, pale face, right? Cold extremities, slow pulse, depressions. Yang conditions result from an excessive ki, red face, fever, fast pulse, and agitation, right? I mean, that's one way of finding it, but like I said, if you have a background information on the yin and yang, right, you can definitely find that. All right, good. Moving on to next. 38. As it is used in line 49, the word concentrated most nearly means. Now, of course, first thing first, let's try to find concentrated meaning or the original meaning of concentrated. Extracted, no. Extracted is different meaning. Concentrated, extracted, you extract it out. Pay attention to concentrated, maybe. Gathered together, concentrated, maybe. Directed to one topic, concentrated, maybe. So any one of these, right? So let's try to find line 49 and see what the concentrated means. So line 49, here we go, line 49. Here we go. But the endorphin story doesn't explain many of the other, I'm sorry, we need to read further. The acupoints that have been mapped over thousands of years are likely the spots where nerves are concentrated. The nerves are concentrated, right? These acupoints are where the nerves are actually concentrated. So if that's what concentrated means, is it paid attention to? Is it gathered together or direct to one point? Definitely gathered together, right? Nerve points concentrated. So the answer will have to be H, right? Okay, 39. According to the passage, Cho would have determined that volunteers had experienced the placebo effect in which of the following procedures had created increased activity in the visual cortex of the brain. So Cho would have determined that volunteers had experienced a placebo effect if which one of these following procedures had created. Remember, there was that big toe part of it, right? So flashing a light in front of them, stimulate one of their vision-related acupoints, or having them read an eye examination chart, or stimulating a place that was not visual acupoint. That's it, right? The big toe part of it. This is just another way of saying the big toe, right? All right, lastly, 40. In the last paragraph, the author expresses the belief that scientists who open a new line of search or research on a topic are likely to quickly discover the answers to the questions they raise, or find that new questions arise as old ones are answered, or receive answers far different than they anticipated, or learn that they have often asked the wrong question. So which one of these? So we'll read the last sentence or last paragraph per se, right? Last paragraph, like many preliminary scientific reports, Cho's study raises more questions than it answers. Still, he has demonstrated new functional effects of acupuncture. Classically, acupuncture was the ultimate in experimentation, right? People collected data for thousands of years, says Joey Johns, professor of radiological sciences at the University of California at Irvine and co-author of the study. With these studies, we are demonstrated that for at least some acupuncture points, a connection goes through the brain, right? So we are realizing that. So what we do is, this is the idea, right? Like many preliminary scientific reports, Cho's study raises more questions than it answers. So what happens is that, of course, most notably, quickly find the answers? I don't think so. Find that new questions arise as the old ones are answered. This is probably the best answer, right? Receive answers far different than they anticipated? Probably not. Learn that they have often asked the wrong questions? Probably not, right? So the best answer would be, right? You see the idea, right? We read that part already, and we know that it will answer, it will raise new questions than answering the old ones, right? Or answering more questions. So answer questions and then new ones arising. So that would be the best, right? So there is it, right? We are at the end of our lessons and lectures. Now, what I am hoping is that you have learned something of a valuable, or something, some lesson of a valuable lesson, in that you don't really have to read the entire reading or entire passage, right? If you could, definitely you should, but you know, it's not really required for you to do that, especially those of you who are native, right, in nature. And even those of you who are native in nature, I mean, if you are really not excelling in reading, right, per se, reading, you can use this method, right? Reading the only important main points to answer the questions, and it will help you a lot, all right? So please remember to use these methods as well as your own methods. I'm not saying abandon your own methods, although, you know, it would help if you completely change to this method. But if that doesn't work, then use this method along with your method so that you can have a better score in reading. Now remember, one score matters, right? One raw score matters. And so I want you to really pay attention to all the different questions, right? All the different questions, and try not making mistake, okay? And last of all, I want you to stack up your knowledge. I want you to, you know, like absorb like a sponge, all right? Any knowledge that you come across, don't think that it's useless. Don't think that it's below you. It's not. All knowledge is sacred, and I believe that you should, as much as possible, absorb all the knowledges out there in the world. Not to the fullest sense, because you couldn't, probably, you wouldn't have the time to do so, but at least to a shallow point where you know you can definitely say to the other people that you know something about that, but maybe not in detail. All right. So thank you for watching. This has been Isaac, and I'll see you in other subjects. Bye-bye.